Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, JTF. My name is Chaim Ben Pesach. This program is dedicated to elevating the soul of Eden Ben Yitzchak. Ron Paul, that lying coward, claims that he knew nothing about all the newsletters that he was printing for decades, printing newsletters on a regular basis in which he was preaching Nazi, racist, and anti-Semitic hatred. The worst type of Nazi hate-mongering imaginable, the type of thing you would expect to read in newsletters from the Nazi Party or the Ku Klux Klan. That's what he was printing in his newsletters. The newsletters were printed under his name, under his signature. And he was being paid for the newsletters, and he claims he knows nothing about them, that he didn't write them, he knows nothing about them. Who was writing them? And then when he's asked who wrote them if you didn't write them, he says he has no idea who wrote his newsletters that, again, were signed by him and were under his name, were printed for decades and on a regular basis, and he was getting money from all of this. He was earning money for all of this. If any other candidate, if any other Republican candidate had had even 1% of this type of scandal in their background, they'd be out of the race. That would be it. If this had happened to Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich or any other Republican candidate, they'd be out of the race. The reason Ron Paul is still being considered even in any way after this type of scandal is because the left-wing news media loves Ron Paul because he's anti-American and anti-Israel, and the left-wing media is anti-American and anti-Israel. And because he undermines the Republican Party and undermines the conservative cause. And that's what the left-wing media wants to do, and they're using him to do that. But his claim, his laughable claim that he knew nothing about these newsletters? What, are you kidding me? These newsletters were written by him. They represent his views 100%. That's why when the owner of Stormfront, which is the biggest neo-Nazi website in the world and the biggest neo-Nazi forum in the world, when the owner of Stormfront sent a contribution to his campaign for president and the media asked him about it, he refused to return the contribution. And he shook hands with the owner of Stormfront. Again, this is the head of an openly Nazi website and an openly Nazi forum, the biggest Nazi forum in the world. And Ron Paul shook his hand and took photographs with him and members of his filthy Nazi family and accepted his contribution to his campaign and refused to return the contribution. Ron Paul has the nerve then to talk about other candidates and do the worst type of negative advertising against Newt Gingrich, for instance. He does the worst type of advertising against other candidates who have a decent or honorable background. And yes, compared to Ron Paul, they all have an honorable and decent background. Compared to Ron Paul, and I don't like most of the other candidates running, but compared to Ron Paul, and he's supposed to be the honest candidate, and he pretends he knew nothing about newsletters that he himself signed that had his name on it, that he was being paid for. And then when asked, you didn't write it, who wrote? Then who could have written it? It was under your name, under your signature, under your byline. Who could have written it? It was called the Ron Paul newsletter. Who could have written this all these years, all these terrible things that were in there? And he says, oh, I have no idea. I don't know who wrote it. Oh, come on. You know what this is like? This is like Barack Hussein Obama. When he attended the anti-Semitic and racist church, Nazi church of Jeremiah Wright. For 20 years he attended the Nazi, racist, anti-Semitic church of Jeremiah Wright. And then he claimed he had no idea that Jeremiah Wright was preaching Nazi-style hatred against whites and against Jews and against America and against Israel. He had no idea that this was going on for 20 years, even though he attended the church for 20 years. Every year was giving tens of thousands of dollars. His biggest charitable contributions were to that so-called church, a church which was honoring Louis Farrakhan. Barack Hussein Obama himself went to the Million Man March of Louis Farrakhan. So Barack Hussein Obama obviously agrees with Jeremiah Wright and agrees with that agenda. But the incredible lie that he claims he knew nothing about this for 20 years, and the evil news media that supports Obama let him get away with it. And now Ron Paul is playing the same game, and the media is letting Ron Paul get away with this little game that he's playing. He's a lying weasel. Ron Paul is a lying, cowardly weasel. Be a man. Be a man and admit it. You wrote it. Stand by your own words. Stop trying to hide like a filthy little coward. Be a man and admit it and own up to your own actions. You're the most dishonest of all the candidates in the race. You hideous, hypocritical, duplicitous fraud. And so, I know that all of his zombie-like followers, some of them, so this is not going to affect some of them at all, because they just follow him fanatically and blindly no matter what. And others, many of his other followers, will want to support him even more now, because they agree with his Nazi philosophy. They agree with his hatred against America and against Jews and against other groups of people. They agree with all of this. Just like they agree with him defending Muslim terrorist Iran, and they agree with him defending Al-Qaeda, and they agree with him saying 9/11 was America's fault, and they agree with him supporting legalization of heroin and cocaine and crack and methamphetamine. A lot of his supporters, by the way, are supporting him because they want to legalize all these drugs because they themselves are drug users. He is a fraud and a liar and a weasel. At least be man enough, if you're supposed to be the one honest candidate running, the one candidate who tells the truth. Come on, everybody knows you're lying. At least be honest enough to stand behind your own words on your own newsletter that had your own name on it. It was called the Ron Paul newsletter. And your own signature on the letters. And you were the one that was paid for the newsletter. You're the one that got the money in your own pocket for the newsletter. And then you claim you didn't write it and had no idea what was going on all these years? And you think anybody is going to be dumb enough to believe that? Well, aside from some of your zombie followers, even they don't believe it. Even they know. They don't care, but they know damn well that you wrote those newsletters. And you don't have the guts to stand behind your own words. You're playing little word games and denial games that everybody knows is a lot of crap. I hope that the voters of Iowa and the voters of New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida see this video before the primaries and caucuses and remember to vote against Ron Paul. Vote for one of the other candidates against Ron Paul. For the future of America, for the future of the Republican Party, for the future of the conservative movement, for the future of truth and justice and righteousness, we have to oppose the hideous, lying, racist and anti-Semitic candidacy of Ron Paul. You're also all invited to join our very exciting and provocative forum, the Forum of the Jewish Task Force, JTF. You don't have to be Jewish to join the JTF Task Force. About half of our members are not Jewish. We'll see you on the forum. Shalom.